She only stayed with me because no one else would take her. My husband said it with a laugh, like it was the punchline of a joke, like I wasn't standing 5 feet away. Like the last 4 years of my life were just a punchline at a backyard barbecue in front of 12 people who were supposed to be our friends. I heard it through the sliding glass door. I had gone inside to grab more napkins. That's all. Napkins. And I came back to the sound of my husband's voice, easy and loose from his third beer, telling the story of how he found me awkward at a company happy hour, quiet in the corner, practically invisible. They all laughed. Someone said, "Classic you, always saving strays." More laughter. He said, "Honestly, I felt bad for her. She would have gone home alone that night no matter what." And then the big finish. She only stayed with me because no one else would take her. I didn't move. I stood behind that glass door holding a stack of paper napkins, and I watched my husband perform for his friends, watched them slap his back and shake their heads like he'd said something charming, watched the woman next to him lean in and touch his arm like what he just said was funny, like I was a joke we were all in on together. I walked back into the kitchen, set the napkins on the counter, looked out the window above the sink at the Austin skyline fading into orange. My name is Maya. I'm 29 years old. I'm a senior software engineer at a fintech company downtown, making more money at my age than anyone in my family ever has. I was the first person in my household to graduate college, the first to move out of state, the first to land a 6-figure salary at 24. I have worked for everything I have, every single thing, and my husband just told 12 people I was a charity case. I didn't go back outside. I opened the refrigerator, stood in the cold air for a moment, and made a decision. Not yet. But soon. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to understand who I was before all of this. I grew up in a small town outside of Columbus, Ohio. My mother worked double shifts at a diner for most of my childhood. My father was in and out, more out than in. We weren't poor in the dramatic sense, but we were the family that clipped coupons, that wore the same winter coat for 3 years, that knew exactly which gas station had the cheapest prices on any given week. What we had was my grandmother. She lived 2 streets over, and she was the kind of woman who made you feel like the whole world was possible if you just kept your spine straight. When I was 17 and got into Ohio State on a partial scholarship, she took off the thin gold bracelet she wore every single day, a simple chain her own mother had given her, and fastened it around my wrist. "You carry this when things get hard," she told me. "And when things get easy, you wear it to remember." I wore it the day I graduated. I wore it the day I got my first engineering job offer. I wore it to the company happy hour where I met my husband. He was tall, loud in a confident way, funny in a way that seemed effortless. He worked in marketing at a startup. He had ideas, big ones, and he talked about them like they were already real. He asked about my work like he was genuinely impressed. He texted the next day, then the day after. We dated for a year and a half before we got engaged. By then, I had moved to Austin for a better job, and he followed, which felt romantic at the time, like I was worth rearranging your life for. We got married at a small venue in the hill country, just family and close friends. I wore my grandmother's bracelet under my long sleeves. She had passed by then, 2 years before the wedding, and I wanted her there the only way I knew how. The first year of marriage was good enough that I don't dwell on it. He was still at the startup. I was getting promoted. We cooked dinner together on Sundays, went to the farmer's market on Congress, had people over. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Then the startup folded. He wasn't devastated, that was the thing. He was almost relieved. Honestly, Maya, I've been wanting to launch my own thing for a while now. Within a week, he had a whiteboard covered in diagrams and a name for his company and a pitch that he rehearsed on me over breakfast. I believed him. I told him I believed him. I said I would cover things for a few months while he got his footing. A few months became 8. 8 became 14. 14 became the moment I was standing behind a glass door holding napkins, listening to him call me a charity case. I need to be honest about something. Because the version of this story where I'm completely innocent isn't entirely true. There were signs. I saw them. I chose not to look directly at them because looking directly at them meant doing something about them, and doing something about them meant my marriage was over, and I wasn't ready for that yet. So I did what a lot of people do. I pushed, I justified, I looked away. I noticed when the money started moving in ways I didn't authorize. The first time it happened, I was at my desk on a Wednesday afternoon and my phone buzzed with a transaction alert. $48 at a sports bar I'd never been to. I texted my husband. He said he was out with a potential investor, needed to cover the tab, would pay me back from his account. He did pay it back, 2 days later. So I filed it under minor and moved on. But the alerts kept coming. $70 here, $120 there. Once, $230 at what turned out to be a bar in South Congress at 11 on a Thursday night. Each time I asked, there was an answer. Investor meeting. Networking event. Client dinner. Each time the money came back, eventually, mostly. I should have removed his name from my account the first time. I know that. A doctor might miss it. An engineer has very little excuse. But I was married and I loved him, and there's a particular kind of blindness that comes with love, not the innocent kind, the chosen kind, where you know what you're seeing and you squint on purpose. The real fracture came on a Tuesday in March. I was working from home, in the middle of a code review, when my bank app sent a notification I didn't recognize. A new credit card had been opened in my name. I sat very still for a moment. Then I opened the app. There it was, a card I had never applied for, with a credit limit of $8,000 and a balance already sitting at $3,412. I went cold. I checked the application date. It had been submitted online 6 days earlier, on a Wednesday. I had been in a 3-hour product meeting that Wednesday. My husband had been home. I didn't call him. I sat there and I did what I'm trained to do. I gathered information before I acted. I pulled up the card's transaction history, electronics store, a men's clothing website, a hotel in San Marcos for 2 nights, a restaurant I'd never heard of, charged twice in one evening. San Marcos, 45 minutes south of Austin. A hotel. I looked at the transactions for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I opened our shared location app. He was home, had been home, according to the history, all day. But the hotel charge was from 3 weeks ago. I took a screenshot of everything. I sent it to a folder on my personal drive that I created right then and labeled it Q2 Engineering Resources. He would never open that. I set a reminder to call my bank the next morning. That night, I made pasta for dinner. He talked about a meeting he had the next day, a potential partnership that could really accelerate the timeline. I asked questions. I listened. I did not mention the credit card. I was not ready to move yet. But something inside me had changed. The part that was willing to look away had quietly closed its eyes for good. I called my bank the next morning from my car before I went inside my office. I explained that I had not authorized a credit card application. The representative confirmed the card had been opened through my online banking profile. She froze the card immediately and flagged the account. She told me I could file a fraud claim, but that if it had been opened by someone with legitimate access to my credentials, it would be a more complex process. I said I understood. I thanked her. I hung up and sat in the parking garage for 5 minutes. The card was frozen. The damage was contained, but I needed more. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I'd never been before. I was quiet at home, warm even, asking about his day, making coffee the way he liked it, laughing at his jokes. Inside, I was documenting everything. I pulled every bank and credit statement going back 18 months and went through them line by line. What I found made my chest tighten. The amounts I'd noticed were only the surface. There were subscription services I never signed up for. Transfers to a Venmo account I didn't recognize. A car payment, his car, a lease I thought he was handling from his savings, had been automatically drafted from my checking account for 7 months. 7 months. I had been paying for his car and hadn't noticed because the amount was just small enough to blend in. I added it up. Over 18 months, nearly $11,000 had moved out of my accounts in ways I had not approved. $11,000. I sat with that number for a very long time. I also looked into the hotel charge. A simple Google search of the hotel name and the dates matched a weekend he told me he was in Houston at a startup founder retreat. I'd thought the retreat was odd because he never mentioned it again. He didn't mention it again because it wasn't real. I didn't confront him. I took photos of every document I had printed. I uploaded everything to my personal drive. I made a second backup on a USB drive that I left at my mother's house in Columbus. I changed the passwords on every financial account I had, removing his access. I did this over the course of a single Saturday afternoon while he was out at the gym. When he came home, I was watching a show on the couch and offered him leftover pizza. "You're in a good mood," he said. "Just a quiet day," I said. I was not in a good mood. I was ready. The barbecue was 2 weeks later. It was at the home of his oldest friend, a man I'd always found smug, the kind of person who talks over people and then tells you how great a listener he is. His wife was pleasant enough. There were maybe 6 couples total. A few singles. Kids running around the yard. My husband had been looking forward to it for weeks. I had been waiting for it. The first hour was fine. I talked to a woman I liked, a landscape architect from North Austin. We talked about home renovation, her daughter's soccer team, a trip she was planning to Portugal. Normal things. My husband circulated, charming as ever, working the crowd the way he always did at parties, the backslapping, the laughing too loud, the performance. I saw the moment he shifted. It was after the second beer. He started telling a story, the story. I had heard it before, how we met, how he swept me off my feet. Except the version he was telling now had different details than the version he told to my face. The version I was hearing through the glass door was the one he told when I wasn't supposed to be listening. She only stayed with me because no one else would take her. I stood in that kitchen with my paper napkins, and I gave myself exactly 60 seconds. I thought about the credit card, the $11,000, the hotel in San Marcos, the 7 months of car payments, the lies stacked on top of lies, stacked on top of a man who, when he thought I couldn't hear him, described our entire relationship as an act of pity. I thought about my grandmother's bracelet on my wrist. "You carry this when things get hard." I set the napkins down. I walked to the back bedroom where I had left my purse, took out a slim manila folder I had placed there before we left the house that morning, and walked back outside. The group was still laughing. Someone had made a comment about how I worked too much, how he must be so patient. He was nodding along, smiling, enjoying it. I walked up to the table, set my hand on the back of my husband's chair, and smiled at everyone. "Sorry I was inside so long," I said. "I was just getting something." I placed the folder on the picnic table. He looked at it. "What's that?" "Open it," I said. His voice dropped a little. "Maya, please." He opened it. Inside were 8 pages. The first was a summary I had typed up myself. 18 months of unauthorized transactions, itemized and totaled. $11,240. Beneath that was the credit card statement. Then a printout of the hotel booking his name, his email confirmation, dates that matched the weekend he claimed to be in Houston. Then 7 months of car payment drafts from my account. Then screenshots of 3 Venmo transfers to an account registered to a woman's name I did not know. The table went quiet. The smug friend leaned over to look. His wife picked up one of the pages. My husband's face went through several colors. "This is your doing this here?" His voice was low, controlled, but I could see his jaw working. "You told 12 people I was a charity case," I said. My voice was steady. I'd practiced it being steady. "You said the only reason I stayed with you was because no one else would take me. I heard you. Through the door. With the napkins." I paused. "So yes. Here. It's not what it looked like. I'm not asking you to explain." I looked around the table. Some people were staring at the papers. Some were staring at me. The landscape architect from earlier was watching me with something careful in her expression. "I want you all to know the truth, because you were just told a story about me that wasn't true. This is the actual story." My husband reached out to grab the papers. I put my hand flat on top of them. "I've already filed a fraud claim on the credit card," I said. "And tomorrow morning I'll be meeting with a family law attorney. I wanted you to know that before you heard a different version." He stood up. "Let's go inside and talk." "I don't want to talk to you right now," I said quietly. "I want to drive home. You can find another way back." And then I did the only thing left to do. I looked at him, really looked at him, the way I hadn't in months, and I said, without cruelty, without raising my voice, "I'm the reason this life existed. The apartment, the car, the dinners, all of it. And you stood there and told these people I should be grateful. I want you to think about that when you figure out where you're sleeping tonight." I picked up my purse. I took the folder. I was not leaving evidence at a barbecue. I said goodbye to the landscape architect, who was the only one who met my eyes. And I walked around the side of the house to the front, got in my car, and drove home on Mopac with the windows down and my grandmother's bracelet catching the last of the evening light. I did not cry on the drive home. I had already done my crying 3 weeks ago, alone in my car in a parking garage, reading a hotel receipt. I had used up what was available for this particular grief. What was left now was just the work. I called my mother from the driveway. She answered on the second ring because she always answered on the second ring. I left him, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Are you safe? Yes. Are you home? Yes. Then I'll be there tomorrow morning, she said. And that was that. The next 8 weeks were some of the most exhausting and clarifying of my life. My attorney was a woman named Patricia, compact and quick-spoken, who had been doing family law in Travis County for 22 years. She reviewed my documentation folder in one sitting and told me I had done the work of a paralegal. I told her I was an engineer. She said that tracked. We filed for divorce on grounds of financial fraud and marital waste. The evidence was solid. Patricia explained that the credit card opened in my name without my consent was potentially criminal separate from the divorce. That was a matter for law enforcement if I chose to pursue it. I chose to pursue it. Not out of spite, but because it was true, and because ignoring true things had gotten me here. My husband hired an attorney. His attorney sent letters. My attorney responded to the letters. It was exhausting in the way that bureaucratic processes always are not dramatic, just slow and grinding, like debugging code written by someone who didn't document anything. He tried to contact me, constantly, at first. He sent long messages explaining the hotel, the Venmo transfers, the credit card. Each explanation contradicted the last. I read them all once, screenshotted them, sent them to Patricia, and did not respond. He left a voicemail telling me I was overreacting. He left another one that was quieter, where he said he was sorry, that he had gotten into something bad, that it started small and got away from him. I believed the last part. It didn't change anything. He called my mother once. She listened to what he had to say. Then she said, "Sir, my daughter has my number because she loves me. Please don't use it again," and hung up. I went to therapy. Not because I was falling apart, I want to be honest about that, but because I was not falling apart and I wanted to understand why I'd stayed as long as I had. My therapist, a calm woman with a lot of plants in her office, helped me see something I'd been circling without naming. I hadn't ignored the red flags because I was blind. I'd ignored them because confronting them meant admitting that the story I was telling myself, the one where I was loved and chosen and enough, wasn't true. And that story felt necessary. It had felt, for a long time, more necessary than the truth. We worked on that. 3 months after the barbecue, my divorce was finalized. My husband signed everything quickly once Patricia made clear that if he contested, we would proceed with the fraud claim through criminal channels and the full financial documentation would become public court record. He did not want that. He signed. I sat in the courtroom and watched a judge stamp a document and felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief, not sadness, just a quiet clarity, like the moment when you find the bug in 1,000 lines of code. There it is. That's where it went wrong. I walked out of the courthouse into a hot Austin afternoon with my mother beside me. She bought us both iced coffees from a place across the street. We sat outside and didn't say much for a while. "How are you doing?" she asked eventually. I thought about it honestly. "I'm tired," I said. "But it's the tired that comes after, not the tired that comes before." She nodded like she understood the difference. I moved into a new apartment a month later, a 1-bedroom on the east side with good light and concrete floors and a balcony where I could see the city. I painted one wall a deep green. I bought new furniture. Nothing from the old apartment came with me. I didn't want reminders of how that space looked when it was his too. I threw myself back into work, but differently than before. Before, I worked hard as a kind of armor to justify my salary, to prove I deserved my title, to stay busy enough not to think. Now I worked because I was genuinely good at it and I liked it. There's a difference. It shows up in the quality. 6 months after the divorce, I was promoted to engineering lead. My manager told me the team had voted unanimously. I laughed a little when she said that. I don't think I had ever been voted for anything unanimously before. And my ex-husband? I heard things. The way you do in a city that's big, but not that big. His startup never launched. His social circle thinned out. A few of his friends reached out to me privately after the barbecue, which told me enough about what they actually thought of him. He moved into a roommate situation in Round Rock. He got a job at a marketing firm but left after 2 months. I don't know exactly where he is now, and I find that I genuinely don't think about it very often. Once, maybe 4 months after the divorce, I was at the coffee shop near my old office and I saw him through the window. He was sitting alone, looking at his phone, his shoulders rounded inward, smaller somehow than I remembered. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. I didn't feel triumph. I want to be honest about that too. I felt nothing that dramatic. I felt the particular quietness of someone who no longer has to carry something heavy. That's what it felt like, not winning. Not revenge. Just the absence of a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be mine. I kept walking. There was a moment, maybe a month ago, that I keep thinking about. A younger woman on my team, brilliant, 24, 2 years out of college, came to me after a one-on-one and stood in my doorway for a second like she had something to say and wasn't sure she should say it. "Can I ask you something that's not about work?" she said. I told her yes. She asked about being with someone who didn't match your level. Who made you feel like you needed to apologize for doing well? Who found small ways to shrink you down when you weren't paying attention? I asked her what was going on. She told me. Not the details, just the shape of it. It sounded familiar. I recognized the outline the way you recognize a road you've driven 100 times in the dark. I didn't give her advice. That's not what she needed. I just told her what I wished someone had told me earlier, which is this. The moment you notice you've been making yourself smaller, you've already been doing it too long. You don't have to decide everything right now. But notice it. Name it. Don't let it stay in the dark where it keeps growing. She nodded. She said thank you. I don't know what she did with it. It's not my story to know. My grandmother's bracelet lives on my left wrist every day. It has a small dent now from the night I squeezed my hand so hard around it in the parking garage, looking at that hotel receipt. I don't mind the dent. It reminds me where I was and what I did from there. I used to think strength was not falling apart. I don't think that anymore. I've seen myself fall apart in parking garages, in courtrooms, in my mother's arms on a Tuesday night. Strength isn't the absence of that. Strength is the thing you do right after, the folder you build, the accounts you close, the door you walk through on your way out. My silence almost cost me everything. The truth gave me back my life. I know the difference now between what I carry because I want to and what I carry because I forgot I had a choice. I know the difference between being loved and being kept. I know what it sounds like when someone describes you to others when they think you can't hear, and I know now that what they say in those moments is more true than anything they've ever said to your face. I sat on my balcony last Saturday morning with coffee and my book and the kind of light that only exists in Austin in early autumn when the heat has finally broken and everything feels like it belongs to you again. And I felt like myself, not a charity case, not invisible, not the woman in the corner of a happy hour who should have been grateful, just myself, which turns out to be more than enough.